Welcome to Cluecon Weekly. Join us every Wednesday to learn about the latest cutting-edge developments in the real-time communications industry. Cluecon Weekly is brought to you by FreeSWITCH Solutions. Get support and professional services directly from the creators of the FreeSWITCH open source project, solving your issues in the most efficient, stable, and scalable way possible. Get the FreeSWITCH advantage. Visit freeswitch.com. Also brought to you by Cluecon, the premier technology conference for developers by developers. Join us every summer in Chicago. Cluecon kicks off on Monday with our annual hackathon, The Coder Games, followed by 3 days of technology-rich presentations discussing telecom, WebRTC, and IoT from developers around the world. To learn more, visit cluecon.com or call 877-74-A-CLUE.
All right, we're going to do the Cluecon Weekly Live Roundtable. This is going to be like our weekly calls, but it's also going to be like our yearly event, the FreeSWITCH Roundtable. We're just going to interview these guys, talk about what they're working on, where they see things going forward, and let's introduce our panel here. Starting on audience right, we have Anthony Menesale, who you all know and gave a great talk yesterday. Next to him, yeah, big round of applause for Anthony. Next to him, we have Michael Jarvis, the one and the only. Next to him is Brian West. Give a big round of applause to both of them, and particularly Brian for putting together this event. He does a great job every year. He does a ton of work to get this all set up. Big round of applause for Cluecon and Brian.
Thank you.
All right, next to him is Michael Mavroudis. That's our community manager, Jersey Mike. And next to him, we have Josh. All right, so let's go around first and have these guys introduce what they're working on in terms of, they've all joined SignalWire. So what specific piece of that puzzle do you fill in? We know Anthony is the CEO, leader, visionary, and founder, right? Is that approximately the right description?
Yes, and the chief bug fixer.
Okay, all right, perfect. Mike, what are you doing? What are you working on for the SignalWire project?
I mean, it's a combination of all kinds of things. I'm still maintaining releases, pull requests, interacting with the community on a code basis, and all of those pieces. And I'm working heavily on all of the SignalWire custom FreeSWITCH modules and code reviewing that, architecture, all that.
Sounds good. I talked with Brian yesterday. He's working on support, setting up all of their infrastructure for SignalWire. Brian, tell us a bit about that and what does support for this look like and how does that interface with the community?
Well, currently what I'm working on is SignalWire Enterprise Support Infrastructure. It's me and my team, we talk to the customers. And it's kind of cliche, we talk to the customers so the engineers don't have to. But that's pretty much what I focused on is the customer interaction and the flow of getting issues resolved that are customer facing.
That sounds wonderful. And Michael, how does your work as the community manager tie into this new project?
Well, so I've had an absolute wonderful time getting to meet people, and anyone who's in the audience, I want to know every one of you and what you do and how your business works. And so I think we're really kind of here to talk about open source predominantly, right? And so, you know, I think there was a wonderful surprise that we released 1.8, and so Anthony, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So we came around on approaching our second 2.5-year mark on 1.8, which was you know, disappointing for us that we weren't faster at it. But you know, pretty soon when you do software development, you start to realize that it's kind of a never-ending process. So we like to use this analogy to compare to like a dishwasher. You know, like once you fill the dishwasher up, you run it, you're just going to have to put more dishes in it again. And like, try and get into that mindset so we can just like stamp some more uses more often. And, we've been doing a lot of work, and it kind of takes discipline to know when to quit on some things. And, if you find those good spots. And, this time we were coming around on the anniversary of the last time we were talking about 1.8, and we're like, this has got to be the spot where we're ready. So we, rallied in the last like month or two and made sure that we had everything in the right spot. So those, it took a little effort, but we made it.
Yeah. So one of the wonderful things about the project is we have this great conference that we get to talk about all these things and release them and meet all the people that use FreeSWITCH, or at least a small segment of the people who use FreeSWITCH, because there's millions of installs out there, right? But what else have what else can we see? Like, what is it that makes you excited about the new release?
Well, the most exciting thing is probably that we're starting to see kind of an even stability where we're not just pouring code into things anymore. So
Right.
rather than nonstop rapid development, it's more tuning everything.
So rock solid.
Yeah, like the changes are more distributed as far as things that already existed just being improved or modified, or sometimes even removing some stuff that we don't use anymore. So where it's kind of a nice indication that we've found the feature set and things that we've been focused on in the last, since WebRTC started, is really kind of the milestone of where we had a rock solid 1.2 and we basically took a jackhammer to it in order to install WebRTC support and video over the last many years. So we're finally coming back around to just a maintenance type of release, which is great.
And it's amazing how video has RTC and video has just changed people's lives. I got to tell you, at first when I started using video, I was not very happy about it. I didn't like that extra point of contact where you see the person. I was nervous to be on video, and then I think when it all came down to it, I just accepted it so quickly. Once you start using it, one of the things that everybody needs to do is just jump off that cliff and start using video. Because it's a real game changer, and there's such a quick acceptance of it too.
One of the questions I wasn't expecting a lot this week, but I've had at least 5 of these conversations, was about how we work as a distributed workforce, because we're now a much bigger team, and that's a whole different story than it used to be. And like even within our team, we've had these discussions where, guys who had actually never met each other face to face got here on site, and you feel like that these are people you're really close to because we spend all day, every day in an office together. And one of the interesting things about how we do remote workforce is it's kind of like you look at everyone talks about open plan workspaces and how great they are, except they're actually horrible. Except it makes you really accessible, so you get to know the people a lot better. But they're horribly distracting. So
definitely efficiency of operations.
Yeah.
You can, if you use it just internally, which I think is actually one of the really great use cases for remote teams, because we're moving to smaller offices and distributed offices, and you get the best talent from different places in the country and around the world. And they all need to work together. And just to see that person face to face and get that extra interpersonal communications just increases efficiency so much. And the thing is, you get that extra feedback, like you're actually in an office. And that's amazing. It really is. It's amazing.
So the weird thing is we've gotten like all of the positives out of open plan workspaces of the kind of connection you get, but without the distraction. Because when you need to focus, you just hang up. And then someone messages you when they need to continue a conversation. You just pop in for 5 minutes, have the conversation. It's just grabbing Brian, who's walking by to to the water cooler to get a glass of water. Hey, man, I got a question for you. And we really do work that dynamically. So it's been interesting being face-to-face with our entire team, which is spread out literally across the world, and realizing it's like, you know what, we really do sit in each other's, in a desk right next to this person all day long, and you develop those relationships at the same time as you maybe have never actually met in person. So that's been interesting, and a lot of people have been asking about it. I found that.
Well, and when you're talking about hanging up, I mean, hanging up really doesn't happen. It's not like a phone call. It just stays on all the time. And so you'll change the tab, right?
Or mute when you...
Yeah. And I can't tell you how many times I'll call people and they'll be on a video bridge, and all of a sudden you hear the interaction from the third party that are on the RTC. That's hysterical. It happens all the time.
Well, I can tell you when we first started in video, some components, since we used audio a lot early on in the same capacity, but when you switch to video, you have to pay attention to a lot more things like facial expressions. Because you give a lot away, but you gain so much because you know that person has stepped away from their desk because you can see their chair's empty. Before, on an audio conference, you'd be talking for 20 minutes and they've walked away and you have no clue. So and
that's awesome.
It is awesome.
It's awesome.
It absolutely is awesome. But it didn't take long to get used to it. It was about a week for me, and I was like, good, we're on a call all day long.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I didn't understand it. I didn't see it at first, and after using it, it's awesome. It's amazing, and you get, I've gotten to the point where I don't even really want to call people anymore. I'm trying to get them on video bridges.
I've lost the ability to actually understand people on a regular PSTN phone call now. I've become an audio snob to the 48K stereo Opus. And so it's almost impossible when you call me on the phone. Like, Tony will call me and I'm in the car, and it's like, I cannot understand a word you're saying.
Yeah. So everything is centered around Cluecon, right? And over the years, how I see Cluecon is, we talk about the hotels and how they've changed over the years. And, it's not, I don't remember the year number, but it's always this hotel and, what happened at this hotel. And so let's talk about some of those stories. So where did it all start?
It was the Best Western out by the airport.
And we've
Chicago,
come a long
Best
way.
Western.
We've come a long way since the Best Western.
It was not the best.
Absolutely not.
Worst Western.
So I have this great recollection of literally climbing through ceiling tiles they fried a network switch that was running their Wi-Fi. So we traced literal Cat5 cables through their ceiling, found the dead switch, and replaced it because everyone was working and trying to get stuff done, and the network went down.
Right, and we all know at these conferences, nothing happens without super fast internet.
This, by the way, is far from the only time we've replaced hotel network switches because they've gone down during our
struck by lightning.
Yeah.
My fondest memory of the first Cluecon was I was crawling across the floor to plug in an extension cord, and the SWAT team came in. I thought it's just a power cord.
Wait, and so how long ago was that? Like, if we can count the years, we talk about
2005.
I mean, that's a long time. That's a long time.
15 years? 14.
Yeah, at least we usually can be pretty resilient because we're in the crowd where you can actually say, anybody have a network switch? And like 3 people are say, oh yeah, I have one.
It was dangling across their like a walkway, like putting 2 switches together because a lightning storm came through and like knocked out a bunch of their equipment, and it was like we had to have a network. You can't have a conference with no network.
And so that back then it was like pre 1.0, right? And look at how the features and how everything that's happened.
Well, the first Cluecon was 0 point nothing. We didn't even have anything yet.
Empty folder.
The first Cluecon was us still in the discussion phases, talking with people who wanted to do something, and
so
getting people in the same room.
What are the challenges? Because it's one of the most successful open source telephony software projects. What are the successes of just keeping it going? You know, like what do you see for like how does that work? Well, let's talk about that. Like how do you manage the community over such a long period of time and add feature sets and like roadmaps and that type of stuff?
Well, our community has shifted and changed. For example, when 1.4 came out, there was this shift in the type of end user that would use FreeSWITCH because of the introduction of the WebRTC audio component. The same shift happened when 1.6 came out and video became a thing. Prior to that, when 1.2 came out, we had a large blind community that used FreeSWITCH because the config files were well structured and their screen readers could deal with it. That shifted a little bit more in 1.6. People are using FreeSWITCH, so you have deaf people talking to blind people. And you're doing it at a price point that you couldn't do it before. So this technology to allow those types of interactions are now in the hands of everyone. And it's not guarded by a particular company or per minute. You have this stuff available. And you know, it's something that wasn't easy to do previously.
And so from like an endpoint perspective, right? So there's that, but you know, we've heard about like real-time translation and stuff. Like, how do you think that'll like change the industry? And you know, if let's say you didn't speak Spanish, and so you can just talk to someone. I mean, what do you think is there probability of stuff like that, and how will that happen? And
I think there's going to be some change in that because you've seen these components or these devices come out that are like the universal translator from Star Trek.
Yeah,
where I mean, one ear it's coming out English and it's speaking French for you.
We might be able to make that this afternoon.
Yeah.
Dangerous demo.
Yeah.
Who wants to do it?
I mean, it's totally doable now with off-the-shelf APIs. I mean, but do you remember like Cluecon 2.3 kind of days talking with Kevin Lenzo about, you know, they were making that, but only for very like specific military and healthcare applications. Now I think the technology's gotten to the point where you can do true universal.
Now that we have Amazon and Google in the game, we have basically live dictation engines, and then it's just text, and translating text to other languages already there. So
Yep.
And it really is Star Trek technology. It really is. It's gotten to the point where, you know, we all watched it on television and just thought that would never be possible. And now it's all occurring from an open source perspective. You know, it's unbelievable. Okay, so we have some pictures.
Is that the Bloody Mary?
Yes, tell us more about the Bloody Mary.
And so which Cluecon was this at? What hotel? Let's hear the whole story.
Did you know that one?
Well, this episode repeats every year.
Clearly very long ago. Well, Bloody Marys are kind of important.
Key
I
component.
recommend them. They're usually very good for speaking. It makes it part of your complete breakfast in a day when you have to address a large amount of people. So that's kind of a tradition that I've had, I think, the entire time.
Yeah, every time. And I think the how elaborate they got started at when we were at the Hyatt
hotels
or
start
Wyndham.
getting competitive over each other, so they put things like hamburgers in it and grilled cheese sandwiches. Today, this place had a hamburger.
Yeah.
So you get a whole meal out of it.
Yeah, the garnish was a hamburger. It's like you stuck into the drink.
Who's that? Oh.
That's Collins and Jarris together.
Plotting and scheming.
I've got a lot less gray there.
It looks like who to tell.
And everyone looked so young back then.
Yeah, that looks
I
like
remember that
maybe
printer.
what 2000. Yeah, 2007.
With a little of
2008
his
maybe?
sanity left.
Yeah, that's probably our coup d'etat era.
And that was at the Trump, right?
No, this one wasn't at the Trump because there
this
would have
looks
been
like
windows
sometime in the last
background.
couple years.
Yeah.
Is that here? Yeah, the backdrop is.
There's Giovanni. He was up there. There's Seven. Ken. There's William.
That's probably the Intercontinental from 2015.
Different chairs.
Yeah. That was at the Trump.
That looks like the Trump. Yeah.
Oh yes, that's when they interviewed me. I remember that. We were being interviewed by GM Voices.
And there's Tic Tac Verto. That was right there.
That was here 2 years ago.
No, that wasn't here, was it? That was at the
That's this
Intercontinental.
room.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, this room is rounded. There's no squares.
Oh, fair enough.
So one of the main.
That's last year, right?
Yep. Because last year's first. Oh, there's me.
God, you were young.
And that was at. I was wearing an Aaron hat, so that was probably at the Trump.
It's just amazing. It's been such a long
That's
time.
the year we
It's
added
such an amazing legacy.
IPv6, and Aaron came. And
Yes, it was. That was a Wyndham. Or Hyatt. Yeah. Well, it used to be the Wyndham until they changed it mid-year. Is that Christian? Yeah, that was Christian. And Giovanni.
Yeah, it is.
There's 7 in his Chinese book. You still have that book, 7?
I still have a copy of that book. I can't read it, but I have a copy of it.
7, what year was the book? What year did you do the Chinese book? 2012?
So that's probably the first time I met 7.
Oh, God, karaoke.
And we've had a lot of fun with karaoke over the years.
That's got to be 5 years ago. 2003.
No,
Or 2013. So when we had those road cases.
Oh, yeah.
Is that everything? Yep. Does anyone have any questions about kind of where we're going with FreeSWITCH, what's going into new things, how we're doing things differently? I know a lot of people have.
I have a lot of questions about that. How about you tell me where are we going with FreeSWITCH? What are you thinking in terms of the future of it?
Kind of along the lines that Brian was talking about, support procedures. We're definitely locking down our release procedures and trying to do more regular releases on a schedule, which is we've more, like Tony was saying, decided when it was ready. We're going to target things more. Yeah, one more thing. We're going to target things more for a date, and something that we've changed in our development structures, which Tony was kind of touching on, is that new things are kind of done off in branches and don't get merged down in stages. So, for example, the things we're working on with SignalWire, those things we will keep off in a completely separate space, and those the right pieces will kind of trickle down into other branches as they've been fleshed out and well tested. That's going to add to the stability just because of how we can test those things out in a more staged way. Also lets us do releases that kind of go to a date more than a specific feature set. But at the same time, we're starting to do road mapping as far as time frames of releases and the kind of features that we're targeting to them, getting more disciplined in that, doing a better job at following up on pull requests and submissions from customers and community. So those are the things that I've been definitely focusing on lately.
So how can the community help coordinate with that? I mean, are those branches going to be thrown over the wall and just kind of appear all of a sudden, or will some of that happen a little bit in public so people can see where the team is going with things and maybe help contribute?
Depends on what those things are. So the things that, the community can still, contribute their stuff, improvements that they want in the traditional ways that we've been doing all along, submitting pull requests and replying on those. One of the things that we need with the community is just the sheer load of bugs and pull requests that come through is so high. We need significantly more community interaction on those things. Like we desperately need your help to be able to keep that moving smoothly and cleanly. the amount of bug traffic, and I think Tony touched on this in his keynote, is so much higher than it used to be. And we need additional people to kind of help flesh out whether these bugs are real or whether it's just a configuration issue, and look at patches, test patches, give us feedback on whether they work at all. So we definitely need your help there. The answer on how is it going to work as far as what's going to trickle down, it depends on what it is. Some of the more bug fixy kind of things are going to trickle down quicker. The new features, a little bit slower as we flesh out those features. We tended to kind of throw things in the deep end before. We're taking a little bit of a slower approach on features to bring more fleshed out features that are more stable out to people. Now I think that's going to give us better releases that people can depend on.
So what would you recommend? As we have new members come into the community, there's always a learning curve at FreeSWITCH. And so what would you recommend would be the best way to kind of, have people, how to get it up and running? How do they, get it installed? What's the best way for new members to start working from just connecting a call to getting a video bridge up?
Would Josh, since Josh is one of the newest members of our team, maybe you could give some insight on that?
Hey, good afternoon. My name's Joshua Young. I was brought aboard here about a little over a year ago, and one of the tasks that I've been given was to develop training material and offer training. And so that's one of the new things we do twice a month. We'll do a second Tuesday, second Thursday, where we offer a 4-hour training as well as an 8-hour training. And that's pretty much, it's at this point, it's just a basic FreeSWITCH training. So those of you who are familiar with FreeSWITCH may not benefit much, but if you do have new employees that you bring aboard and you want to bring them up to speed real quick, you can definitely sign them up for the online training. And I am going to be performing the training here on Friday as well, so I will be conducting that. And so,
but then we also have we have training, we did a training at IT Expo for over 100 people.
Yeah, we do make appearances at various other conferencing events, offer training there as well. And so that's pretty much, even though I say it's basic FreeSWITCH training, you still should probably have a fair amount of knowledge when it comes to Linux, because most of the training that we do is all just Linux command line, dealing with XML files, configuring FreeSWITCH via XML. And so that's pretty much what we do is offer online training and, of course, in-person training too at various events. So
we've analyzed the user experience, more than once. We're going into 15 years of existence, and we'd always try and we're used to how it works, so then we have to try and get someone else's feedback. But we revisited this multiple times. Right now, we have books out there that we've made. Giovanni worked with me on making the book, the most recent one. It's probably the best one we've made. We don't really get that much out of it, so I'm not plugging it.
Well, and there's a lot of online resources too. We have the mailing list.
Yeah.
There's all different ways to correspond.
One thing we kind of did to get the best thing I say we did is the VM image that we have, where it's basically you turn it on and it's already set up, and then you can go through. There's a pretty lengthy tutorial even online in our wiki page, but sometimes just going through the book off of that VM is a good combo. I've had
and then part of the true magic of it too is, and this has always impressed me so much with open source, is you come to a conference like this, and if you have questions, you just walk up to the people that wrote the software. It's a staggering concept. There isn't anywhere else where you can do that. Yeah. And there's no one better to get the information from when it comes down to it. Nobody else will ever have the same level of insight as the person who actually wrote the code.
Well, yeah, it's very overwhelming when you just don't think about it much, and then you see this heavy book flop down on the table, and you're like, the stuff that we built actually requires a book. We don't think of it that way.
Several books.
Yeah, I think I've read every book, and when I read the books, it's so funny. I always do it on the plane. So I'll see, yep, yeah. I'm on the plane flying out here, and I got to see the differences between the book and read up all the new
The
stuff.
books make me
for the new
uncomfortable
version.
because they're never perfect. Like, we're used to being electronic age, so we want to everything's digital and we can change it all the time.
Yeah,
the book is out of date 1 minute after it's printed.
Yeah, on Confluence, you just go right
There's
out to
a lot of pretty good
Confluence,
ones.
and you can change it. But that book's out there forever.
Yeah, and there's most of it's right, but I'll still see something wrong every once in a while. And if it's a typo or whatever, the publishers aren't always so great, as Giovanni can attest to. Even when we tell them typos to fix, they don't always do it. They're happy just having an errata page somewhere, but that's kind of annoying because if it's just, I'm always worried there's going to be one typo somewhere that causes some poor person to be stuck for 3 hours.
And so I guess that search for perfection works in every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
If you have any further inquiries about training, you can just email training@freeswitch.com.
Yeah,
Somebody
Josh
back
does a
to
pretty good job with the training. It's you gotta give him a lot of props for dealing with that.
I think what, one of the things I've learned is they have one of the really great things to do. I did this recently. When you're looking at bringing on, you don't have to just do the training. Just for the training, there's a lot of other uses for the training. You can, let's say if you want to do an analysis of a new hire or something like that, you send them out, they take the training, and Josh will tell you how they did and
Give
stuff
them a
like that.
task. Install FreeSWITCH.
And that's a great. It's a non-standard use case, and I think it's actually a really excellent one.
Well, that's how I sent out job interview when people submit for the job that we had posted for support. I wouldn't even go to the second stage of a job interview or even get them on the phone unless they installed FreeSWITCH, called me, and they got extra points if they changed the caller ID name, and extra points if they called me via video, which did save a lot of time.
And it's a great way to validate it. It's a great way to validate it too.
Yes.
So what other things have you done like that?
That's the biggest one. Everybody that works on our team right now has done that task. Josh was the first one that we interviewed that had it done before we got him on the phone. So that was a good thing. He's sitting there making phone calls we're on video with him, and he's already got it all set up and going. So it was a good sign.
Yeah, and it's a great training. I mean, I took the training myself, and every once in a while you just maybe 90% of it, and then there's something there that it just hits you oh, that's awesome.
Well, even like Tony has said in his talk yesterday, that there's times he's I need to go implement this thing, and then you go look in the code, oh, it's already implemented.
Yeah,
so
and it goes
Exactly in the way that I just plan to do it.
Yes, exactly. It's I did this before.
I think people have the tendency to assume that they know it all, and you don't know what you don't know until you find out something new, right?
Well, there's just so much of FreeSWITCH to know, and even I sometimes, a lot of times, have to go double check things because I'm I'm pretty sure this is how this works, but I need to go double check.
Yeah, that happens with me all the time.
Yeah.
Well,
for sure.
It's so hard to figure out. I'm sure everyone that works in UI and UX understands that everyone thinks differently, and you're trying to find that thing that everyone believes is, all of us think our phone should work differently than it does, and you swear at it once in a while, or this isn't intuitive, and at least with us, that's kind of where we got so many features from, because we go to do something in FreeSWITCH, and it should really work like this, and then a half hour later, now it does, so, or we wish it would do this, and it does. Because we can just add it whenever we want. And we can't change our iPhone, but at least we can control something in our lives.
Yes.
And so you do get a lot of obscure use cases because there's such a large install base, right? And that's that's part of the power of it is hearing from the
cell
community.
doors over SIP. We had that one.
Yep.
Needed extra SIP headers so that it would properly open and close the jail cell doors.
Yeah, even with all the years we've had in as part of SignalWire, and you'll see some of them in the release that just came out. There's new features that we've added to polish out feature sets that we've needed for SignalWire. So it's a nonstop thing, and it's our code, but it's also open source, and it's one of the reasons that it's so easy to change is we've designed it in a modular way to make enhancements easy for everyone, including ourselves.
Right, and the other thing I've always touted is people come up to me and they don't know C or they don't know how to program. FreeSWITCH itself makes a lot of the hard stuff very easy. So you don't really, in the grand scheme of things, if you want to do something in C with FreeSWITCH, it's quite simple. You just look where somebody else does something in the code similar, and all the hard stuff has been abstracted away where you don't even have to think about it for the most part. So anybody can code.
And so what are some other like really interesting implementations? So like I remember hearing like about a medical one time, and like there's just so many things you can do, and it can be used differently. But let's hear about like not the non-standard stuff, the really interesting like the jail cells. And
I won't get into like specifics of who the customers were, but we've had a couple customers lately who have had significant scaling issues with complex applications. And a lot of people tend to do a lot of scripting to put their applications together because it's really accessible. But it's not always the most efficient. And we've had a couple customers who hit kind of breaking points on scalability. And when we initially suggested...
And so that's typically the point where they come to you guys for the consulting.
Yeah, I mean, but these are guys who, both of these customers have actually gone and done the bulk of this coding themselves. And, the suggestion was to move towards, less scripting and more actual custom modules. And getting your head wrapped around what that means is a little bit of a challenge sometimes. Once people get into it, they see the power of it and how easy it actually is. It's pretty much as easy as scripting, with a lot more power. And in a couple tricks of how to jump into it in a way that is as easy as scripting, and it solved a huge number of problems for people.
Well, that's the power of FreeSWITCH. Just because you can do something a certain way and it works in your lab when you're having one single phone call doesn't mean that's what you should do when you roll it into production. And that's like part of the power of FreeSWITCH is the rapid prototype, being able to do those things, but you need to reevaluate the right way to do some of these components. And like it's something that I've seen time and time again where somebody builds something in the lab, one call works, they roll it into production, and it's not exactly optimal.
Yeah.
Or as James Bodie would say, suboptimal.
Yeah, that's really the double-edged sword, because open source is amazing, and that's our entire principle. But there's a trade-off, because our goal on open source is to be versatile, and versatility is the enemy of like a production product, because it's basically anything you want to do is possible, which means it's like very difficult to harden and perfect. So, we have requirements to be able to work in any environment, like multiple kinds of connections to databases and like 10 different choices of like places to get your config from, and all those kinds of things that just kind of make it so that it's hard to find a choice of which way you want to do things sometimes, because it's all driven by everyone's requests along the years or inspirations we've had, and wanting to run anywhere, because we still have this goal to run in a Raspberry Pi or on a Xeon server. So, and it's like, and work properly on either one. And, in some environments there are no other databases or anything, so then we have to have our own built-in one, and then we can switch over to using a real one. And so all those things are kind of, like, probably one of our biggest challenges is balancing all those things.
And so we've seen a lot of waves of like IoT devices and slim devices and stuff like that. And it's amazing because, just to hear the stories of like, how FreeSWITCH powers all these slim devices and non-standard use cases, I've always found that really interesting as well.
One of the things that people probably haven't noticed yet about 1.8.1 is we did a massive rework of all of the Windows build and Windows installer stuff. None of the video features were ever in Windows. I think almost all of that is now in there in the binary installer, totally accessible. The build should be almost twice as quick. We moved to binary dependencies for some things and built a whole new system for that. Added tons of things that just no one had ever asked for, so we didn't have in there. So it got a major rework.
And you know,
and that installer's up right now.
that reminds me of the, you know, you'll have somebody in the community come in and they'll be asking for assistance, and you'll be asking them to run commands and do things, and you're halfway through debugging their problem, and they're like, oh yeah, we're on Windows. You honestly can't hardly tell unless they tell you. There's just a few giveaways like the slashes and pathing and things like that, but it's, yeah, it's easy to just breeze over the fact that it's running on Windows or Mac or Linux or BSD or Solaris or whatever you want to run it on.
Right, and so I think sometimes we kind of lose sight of how far it's all come, because I remember the days, you know, when you want someone to start using FreeSWITCH, I think a big barrier to getting it to run back in the old days was they'd have to compile it, right? Now we've got packages for everything.
Well, I've also taken advantage every time we brought somebody on to have them go over the Getting Started guide and give a fresh perspective on how to get started, what tripped up a new person. Because to us, we're the wrong people to go and look at that document to figure out what is missing, because it's all obvious to us. We're going to skip steps. But some people may not understand some of those steps. So we do take advantage of that, new people coming in, giving us feedback on those types of things. When Josh started, we had him rewrite it, and then Fred started, we went over it again. These guys are instrumental in support.
Yeah, so
have been very helpful.
The books, the training, all that stuff.
Yes.
It just makes it so easy.
Yeah, they help get some of those little catches that will trip people up.
Yeah, we have so many different users, and everyone has a different relationship with open source. You know, some are just happy to have the software and they use it. They're just an end user. Some want to help develop on it. Like, some actually get deep and understand it. I mean, this has been going on forever. Before we started FreeSWITCH, Brian, Mike, and I were like bug marshals at Asterisk. We put a lot of effort into that, and like that hasn't really changed. You know, like as we move on, one of the great things about open source is it's not like some kind of war or something. So we get to meet. Like, it's great to have David here. We compare notes, and we have so much of the same problems, which is kind of gives us like another perspective on them. So we discuss like challenges of dealing with, you know, no one really thinks about the maintenance and packaging, and like writing the code is like the first step, and it's like 6 more months of like making that actually into something useful, because, you know, from that first time that commit hits the repo till some end user is perfectly satisfied, because the ecosystem requires there to be, you know, just unfamiliar users that only see the software on the outside, because you can't have everyone like digging in the code. It's not even good for it in the first place. So you have to find that balance where you want to have a portion of your community who just happily uses the software the way it is in the repo. You know, they pull it and use it, and just like the rest of the ecosystem on any Linux environment, for instance, like there's like 100 other softwares that you just use, and there's plenty of people that, you know, when we used to work on stuff, we're different, and I think we're probably in more of a minority, but when we build stuff and work on Linux and find something wrong, we'll, even if it's over in some other completely different package, we'll like go find the source code of that and figure out what's wrong with it, report it to them, you know, and then we find the maintainer of that, and then we have to go to Debian and tell them that they have to go tell those guys that they need a new version pulled in, and it's a lot of politics and all kinds of stuff that really maybe is uninteresting to some, and to others it's like their whole life, and it takes so many different pieces. So it's kind of one of the great parts about having Cluecon every year is we have the leader of all these different projects, and we can compare those notes and kind of talk about those things too.
Well, and so what you guys have done is absolutely magical. It's real change the world technology. I mean, and it's done in a fact that's open and unbelievable. And so I think we just want to thank you for so much contribution and so much amazing work, and, you know, really just doing so many wonderful things. And we want to thank the audience for coming in today, because, you know, you're awesome too. And, you know, users are the most important things.
Yes, definitely.
All right, big thanks to the Cluecon FreeSWITCH team here. So once again, that was great. We're excited to have these guys with us, and excited that they were able to give us a little bit of insight into what's going on with FreeSWITCH. Abby's going to be stepping up to give us some better prizes, some new giveaways, and then we will be breaking for lunch. Lunch is from now until 1:30 p.m. when we'll be back. to hear from Nigel Daniels. So be sure to be back on time at 1:30, and be sure to stick around just a few minutes so Abby can give away these wonderful prizes. Take it away, Abby.